worship. As we look forward to this week of remembering what Christ did for us on the cross, as we look forward to coming together next Sunday to celebrate his resurrection, I just want to read a few verses from Philippians 2. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Would you join us as we worship?
What Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Grace Point Church of Paradise. My name is Greg Petershot. I'm the executive pastor of discipleship here. I'm glad to have you here with us this morning. This morning we have some special guests all the way from Africa. Matt, Julie, and family, if you guys want to come up and join me here, it'd be great. Come in this way, so figure that out. Give your own mic. You're really special. So I know a lot of you know Matt and Julie, and some of you get to hear a little bit more of their story right now downstairs here during the 9 o'clock hour. Matt will also be bringing the message this morning as well, so we're looking forward to that as well. And you're having a nice relaxing morning here. Technology is just working in your favor everywhere we go. No problems at all. So glad to have you guys here. If you could just give a quick little introduction of who you are, especially for those that may never have met you before. And also a little bit of what you're doing, where you're at with things right now, in short summary. Yeah. And, we'll go from there. Go ahead.
I'm Julie Walsh, and I grew up here in this church. Then met Matt at college, and we got married and lived up in the Messiah College area, where we were going to school, and then lived there for a few years until we went to Burkina. We have Thomas. Special day for him. He turns 13 today.
Oh.
We have Tessa and Stephanie and Sarah, and there are 2 little ones, Samuel and Andrew, are in the nursery.
We couldn't fit them all on the stage, so
we've been in Burkina Faso since 2007. Living and working in a rural village. We had started working with the handicap center that was there, and then that moved into development work, starting ODD, Open for Development, until a year ago we had to move into the capital city because for security reasons. So we've been living there and adjusting to life in a big city, and Matt's been working with in the SIM office there in admin, and has just recently taken on the role of interim director for SIM Burkina. And so we have, that's what we'll be doing now this next year until we come for home assignment next March.
And Julie passes the time a little bit. I mean, some homeschooling and a few other things around that. Very, very busy.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to keep her busy. I can't quite figure it out. Yeah. No, that's great. So so now this kind of a surprise visit for you guys. I mean, but I'm glad that you guys could join us here now. But you'll be coming back next March. Is that
March 2020?
2020. And you'll be back for a little.
At least a year.
At least a year. So good to see you back. So great. Well, have a great day, man. That's a special day. Yeah. All right. Well, let me pray for you guys, and then we'll go from there. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much, Lord, for the Walshes, for the ministry they have there, Lord, and just we pray just continued blessing there, Lord, for open doors, for clarity of what's next, clarity of what you have for them specifically, and clarity for us as a church of how we can support and pray for them, how we can bless them, what gifts they need, what things they need, and just continue to support them well and daily in prayer, and just we just thank you for them. We thank you for where you have them, even though it might be a little faulty at times as far as direction. But Lord, we're so thankful for them. We're thankful for the ministry that they have. We're also thankful that Matt can bring a message with us this morning. And Lord, we just pray that for all of us, you just give direction, you just give clarity. We pray that those in the congregation who are just feeling a little not sure what's next in their lives as well, that you just continue to bring clarity there. Pray that you bring comfort to those who need comfort, healing to those that need healing. Lord, we're just so grateful to be here in your presence, to be together as a family, to be able to worship you together, and to spend time here this morning with you and with each other. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, thanks a lot, guys. As they're coming down, this morning we're going to just go ahead and dismiss the junior church at this time. So if you have a child 3 to 5th grade, let me read it. 5 years old to 3rd grade. I knew something. Hey, if you have a kid, you just want to get rid of them, now's the time. No. You go ahead and send them downstairs. The team will meet them in the lobby. They'll take them downstairs. If you are a parent who did not check in your kid, we ask that you go as well and check in and make sure we know which kid is which. After the service, parents, you can go down and get them in the junior high room, which is you just go downstairs, it's right underneath me, go down the kids wing, and it's where all the kids are at, so it's pretty obvious. So you can pick them up there. So grateful for them, grateful for that ministry, especially as well. So thank you for that. If you want to, at this time, go ahead and pull out your communication card. You should have received one of those in your program as you arrive. And we'd love to spend some time each morning filling these out. Not because we don't need something to do, but because they're very important. It's a great way to just sign up for events, read events, see what's happening. It's a great way for prayer requests as well. The lead team prays for all those requests each week. So it involves someone. So yeah, please fill the card out. Great event yesterday at Chicken Barbecue. There is some extra left over. So as you're leaving today, there will be a table outside with some chicken barbecue. So if you didn't plan lunch yet, lunch is planned for you. You got that. So check that out. First, 500. I don't know how many is there. So don't rush, don't run. It'll be okay. Keep safety first here. So if you're visiting with us, we're really glad to have you here this morning as well. The communications card is a great tool for you to fill out, and we can get to know you a little bit and follow up with you as well, especially if you have any questions or need any clarifications. But also, if you're a guest with us, as you leave, if you want to stop by the Welcome Center, we have a book for you that we'd love to share with you and give to you, even if you know you're not coming back. We'd love to have you grab that book, How Good is Good Enough by Andy Stanley, or something like that. Also, as you're leaving, on the left side in the cafe, one of our elders, Brad Weiler, is going to be there this morning. So if you want to talk to some of the leadership, whatever, Brad will be there to answer any questions. Any question at all, he can answer. So yes, we're grateful for that. So at this time, I invite you to go ahead and grab a pen. It should be in the pew in front of you. And we'll take some time, fill those cards out. As they come to receive the morning offering, you can just put the card in there. If you're not done with it, that's okay. Just put it in the Welcome Center on the way out. We'll take some time to fill out those cards at this time.
I'm going to be reading this morning from John chapter 11. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days, and then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light." After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake, I am glad I was not there so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Mary and Martha to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask." And Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." And Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God who is to come into the world." And after she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see him," they replied. And Jesus wept. And the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. There was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there for 4 days." And Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped in strips of linen and cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go."
Good morning, Grace Point.
Good morning.
It is a blessing to be here with you this morning. Before I get started, I just want to take a little time and say thank you so much for the many, many ways that this church has supported us and blessed us over the years. Since we began our work in Burkina Faso, this church has sent out more people to come along beside us, to minister with us in Burkina than any other church. Extremely generous in your financial support and your prayers. And a lot of what we have been able to do over the years would not have been possible without the support of this church. And it is a blessing for us to be here and to celebrate and to worship with you today. The cost of God's glory. If I were to ask you the question, who here would like to see God's glory? Or who here would like to see God glorified? I imagine that a large number of you would raise your hands. Of course we want to see God's glory. And we have a story here, a story that's really well known, where we see in this miraculous, powerful way, God is glorified. Glorified in such a way that is undeniable. A fundamental part of the story arc of Jesus as he's in his ministry coming to this point. We have this resurrection story of Lazarus, and this is a story that I imagine if you spent a lot of time in churches, you've heard this story before, and there are a lot of really awesome topics or themes that you could talk about with this passage. I'm pretty certain I've heard at least a dozen times different sermons on this topic. This is the last big miracle in the book of John before Jesus begins his journey into Jerusalem. So we're kind of ending his kind of public ministry time, and he's heading into Jerusalem to begin the final chapter there. We have this comparison of him, of Jesus resurrecting Lazarus here and foreshadowing his own resurrection in a short period of time. This is the first time that Jesus conquered death publicly. He had raised a young girl before, but it was private. And he specifically told his disciples, others around him, don't talk about this. In this instance, it was a complete opposite. There was a very large crowd. This was a very public person, and Jesus raised Lazarus in a very public way. He's stating his case in front of the people. We have Jesus declaring that he is the resurrection and the life, a fundamental doctrinal point for Christians. Jesus stating, I am the resurrection and the life. These are all really important and probably better topics to talk about. But I want to focus on what God has been showing me as I've been reading through this passage in our current experiences. And one of the powers of the scriptures is that no matter how many times you read them, depending on what you're going through in your life, you see new things. The Holy Spirit shows you different ways, different points of view in the story, and it allows you to kind of keep gleaning from Scripture the things that you need at that stage of your life. Part of that is point of view. So now, I don't know about you, but when I read a story, I tend to imagine myself in the role of the protagonist and the role of the hero of the story. So I'm the one that's defeating the dragons or saving the people in the ocean or doing something important. Whatever the story is, I am seeing it. I'm imagining myself in that role of that person going through the story. And so in this case, kind of imagining what would it have been like to be Jesus in that story, working in the village and then hearing that this person that I cared about deeply was sick, and the decisions making through that process. I kind of imagine from that point of view. Now maybe you guys are a little bit less egotistical than I am, and so instead of imagining yourself as Jesus, you are imagine yourself as one of the disciples. You know, you've been through this before. Okay, here's something that's happening, and someone comes and Jesus does something that doesn't seem ordinary. And you have to imagine by now that their radar is a little bit attuned to, ooh, hey, maybe something's going to happen here, you know. We've seen these signs before where we think Jesus is going to go do something, and he's doing something a little bit odd, and it usually ends really well, but we don't know how it's going to end in this case. And maybe they're discussing with each other, hey, you know, I'll trade you a fish if this happens, and you give me your fish if that happens. Talking about how is Jesus going to act in this situation. And so maybe you're reading the story through the lens of one of the disciples waiting and expecting God's glory to take place. Maybe you're a member of the crowd. You know, you're not really part of the inner circle. You don't really know everything that's going on all the time. But you're there and you're an outside observer watching these events take place. You're at the burial site and you see Jesus coming in, and you see the energy, the excitement that is taking place. And then the miracle of the stone being rolled away and Lazarus coming out of the grave. I mean, you know, talk about things that go on Facebook or on Instagram. This is going to be something that is going to be discussed and talked about as this huge event. And you were there. You know, you always say, I was there when that happened. So the point of view that you have in the story can change greatly how you feel about the story or your role in the story. And at this time when I was reading through it, I felt myself reading through it in the role of Mary, Martha, or Lazarus. What was it like for them in the story? We know the end. We're at the end of the story. We know that it worked out. We know that everything turned out well in the end. But for Mary and Martha and Lazarus, during that journey, during those 5, 6, 7, 8 days from whenever he got sick through his death to the resurrection, every day they didn't know how the story would end. This last year has been a very tumultuous year for us. We were here with you in November, December of 2017, traveled back the first week of January 2018 to Mahadaga. We spent a few weeks, to Burkina, we spent a few weeks in Waga doing a homeschool co-op. Traveled down to Mahadaga in February and thought we'd be kind of there for, getting ready for our next 2 years. We had taken a midterm break in a 4-year term. And we were getting ready to start up our program for open door development for the year. And we just had to come into Waga for 10 days for a homeschool co-op. We do it 3 times a year, usually October, January, and March. And so we came in, packed our stuff, and it's always a big deal for us to travel. You don't do it very often in Burkina, and got to take a lot of stuff with you. But we're like, this is only going to be a 1-week co-op. We're going to be there for about 10 days. We don't need this. We don't need to close the windows. We don't need to do all this stuff. And we pack up. We come into Waga, and we find out that we can't go back right away. At first it was wait a couple weeks while the military goes through and does kind of a sweep of the region, and I think they know where a few terrorists are, and they're going to just get them out of there, and then we should be able to go back. And then after that it became, let's wait a few months and see if the amount of terrorist activities that are happening in the area are going to go down. That didn't happen, and it was, let's wait till after Tabaski, this big Muslim festival in August. So now we're waiting from end of March through end of August. August comes and goes, and the situation is getting worse, not getting better. And we made the difficult decision as a mission to let's wait until August 2019. And here we are about halfway through that period, and things aren't getting better. They are continuing to get worse. A few weeks ago, I agreed to take on the role of the interim country director. It's not a role that I aspire towards. I'd much rather be out in the field digging a ditch or installing solar panels or working with young believers. But this last year in Waga, we've had the opportunity to help out in admin, and we've just seen so many changes where our team is going from about 40 members, 40 singles, couples, or families about a year ago down to about 18 by the end of June. Some people are leaving because of schooling, because of retirement, because of sick parents, but some are leaving because of security. Either they don't feel safe, or the work that they want to do, especially the work with Fulani Christians, they can't do because our Fulani brothers and sisters in Christ are coming back to us and saying it's not safe for us Fulanis to be seen with foreigners. And if you can't be with the people you want to minister to, it's very difficult to minister. And so we're going through all these changes, and all of a sudden after about 9 months in the office, I look around and realize I'm the last person with any experience left in admin, somehow after only being there for 9 months, and agreed to take on the role of interim director. So that means for our family now that even if security is perfect tomorrow, we can't go back to Madaga because we're in this position of interim director through our next home assignment in March 2020. So doing that math, doing that calculation of we're not going back, and now we're not going back till then, and then now we have a year of home assignment, and so maybe the next time we see Madaga is March 2021. That's hard. That wasn't our plan. And we're going through moments now where we're actively, questioning why is this happening? 21 years ago, in January 1998, was the first time I went to Burkina Faso. And I was a student beside college working on an engineering project. And from that point in time, I knew that God wanted me to come back and to work there and live there long term. And everything we did from that point on until 2006 when we went off to language school was to advance that goal. When Julie and I started dating, one of the things that came up really early is I think that God's calling me into missions. If that's not something you're interested in, then we probably shouldn't go very far with this. Thankfully, she said yes, and that's worked out really well. But so much of our life, our identity, has been preparing to go, getting ready to be there, being there, prepping. Spent 5 years working at the Center for People with Disabilities before starting up our new ministry, Open Door Development. And after all that time, years, we're finally in a rural village, raising our family in this rural African village, doing community development, everything we felt like God had prepared us for. Been doing that for like the last 5 years, 6 years, and now all of a sudden, it's gone. And we're dealing with this loss, this grieving process of, why is this happening? It doesn't make any sense. It is not part of our plan to be going through this. It doesn't make sense from advancing God's kingdom in our plan for this to be happening. And we keep telling ourselves, we don't understand it. There's got to be some way that God is going to be glorified through this process. And we don't know what it is. And we might never know what it is in this lifetime. So that's the hope that we're holding on to. Let's try that again. So returning to the story, Jesus is ministering in an area, and you have people coming that were sent by Mary and Martha to tell Jesus that Lazarus is sick. And I'm guessing he didn't just fall sick and then they sent him. He'd been sick for a while and they realized that it was getting bad. And they sent him to bring him back to help with the process. But when the messengers arrived, Jesus intentionally waited. So when he heard that he was sick, he then stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. So when Jesus got the news, he did not get up immediately and rush to Lazarus to help him. He stayed and waited for 2 days. We can go ahead and do the math a little bit and realize that most likely when the messengers arrived where Jesus was, Lazarus was already dead. He must have died shortly after the messengers had left, because we have, imagine, about 1 day travel time from where Lazarus is to where Jesus was. They left presumably when he was still alive. 1 day travel time there. Jesus waited 2 days, and then he traveled back 1 day. So you have 4 days of travel, and when he arrived back, they found that Lazarus had been dead for about 4 days. So when the messengers arrived, Jesus knew already that Lazarus was dead. So he could have come right away and still performed the miracle, but he intentionally waited an extra 2 days. He knew that the end result would be God's glory and not death. He knew that. No one else did, but Jesus knew that. There is a valid point in waiting the extra 2 days, because in traditional Jewish belief, the spirit of the body remained around the body for up to 3 days after death. And in the grieving process, in the wailing, the funeral process, the grief grew during those 3 days. Because in the first day, you still have hope. You know, that maybe his spirit will come back to the body, the person will be alive again. Second day, you're running out of time. Third day, the grieving is the worst. That's when you begin losing hope. Because after 3 days, there is no hope. There is no possible way that the spirit could return to the body. And this was a traditional Jewish belief. And so by Jesus waiting those extra 2 days, he assured that when he got there, it was on the 4th day. Any possible cultural explanation or justification to how Lazarus was raised was removed. The only way it could be done was through the power of God. God wanted to make sure that he would receive all of the glory. If it had been earlier, there would have been some people who said, yeah, he did that, but yeah, it can happen. By waiting those extra days, he made sure that God received all of the glory. When Jesus arrives, we have these scenes where Mary and Martha are coming to him and questioning him. And when bad things happen in our lives, it's something that it comes out of us, this question of why. Why did this happen? Why is God allowing this? This is something we're struggling with as a family right now. Why is this happening? And it can be a challenge within a Christian community to allow that person to walk through that pain experience and question without questioning their beliefs, without making them feel bad that they are questioning, because this questioning isn't a sin. They're not doubting who God is, but they are trying to figure out, their spirits are crying out, why is this happening? And we see both Martha and Mary say to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. They are questioning God's plan. How could it be God's plan that their brother died? They knew the power of Jesus. They knew that he could heal. And if he had just gotten there in time, he could have been healed. They're not asking for him to heal someone who's 100 years old and had lived a long life. They're asking him to heal their young brother. And they knew that Jesus could do it. So why wasn't it God's plan for him to do it? And in reality, they didn't understand God's plan. And we recognize that we don't understand God's plan always for our lives, for our ministry in Burkina. We thought we did. We had it all clearly laid out. got a nice 60-page document annotated with all the steps of how it's supposed to happen for the next 40 years. But that's not the way that God works. And in that situation, the situation we're in, the situation that they're in, questioning why is it happening? We're seeking out to try to understand God's plan, because God's plans are not always our plans. We can't look at their questioning or look at the situation that's happening to them and raise the question, well, maybe, and this happens a lot in different denominations, maybe if your faith was stronger, these bad things wouldn't be happening to you. Or maybe, if you prayed more, or you did these other things. In Africa, it's a really big problem, that health and wealth or prosperity gospels. And people believe strongly if bad things are happening to them, it's because they're not faithful enough. They don't believe enough. There's something missing in them. And if they could just be better Christians, then they would be healthy, they would be wealthy, they would be wise, and their life would be perfect. And there are pastors who preach that, and it creates such a sense of depression and oppression on Christians who are trying to then earn God's favor through their actions. We see that that's not the case here. Mary and Martha were true believers of Jesus. We see in the passages we just looked at that both Mary and Martha were assured that if Jesus had just been there, he would have been healed. They're not doubting Jesus' power or his capability. If they had just been there, he would have been healed. Even the crowd, this large crowd, talking amongst themselves. If Jesus had been here, he probably could have healed them. So it's not even like the crowd was doubting the power of Jesus. Martha believed that Lazarus would rise again. She said, Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day. She's a true believer. She's not someone who's questioning. This event is causing challenges in her life, but she's not questioning her faith. She's not questioning her core beliefs. She's just trying to wrap her mind around how this event fits in with those beliefs. And Martha believed that Jesus was the Christ. While the disciples are still struggling with this question, still going back and forth, trying to figure out exactly who is Jesus, what is he here for, what is he supposed to be doing, we have Martha here putting out one of the clearest clear statements of who Jesus is in the New Testament. And she says to him, yes, Lord, I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world. It's not someone who's questioning their faith. Very strong in their faith in the midst of these difficult circumstances. Because remember, at this point in time, we don't know the end. She doesn't know the end. All she knows is that her brother's dead. He's in the grave. He's been there for 4 days. There is no longer hope. Even in her understanding, there's no hope. Jesus' power doesn't extend quite that far. Their pain and their suffering are real. We know the end of the story. We know it works out. We know that there is joy at the end. But the joy at the end doesn't mean that the pain along the way didn't happen. And it doesn't remove the memory of that pain. It doesn't remove completely the scars of that pain. It heals, but who you are after that process can never be who you were before. Lazarus suffered through a sickness just to the point of death. I can't imagine that that was very pleasant. They didn't have a lot of palliative care options, I believe, in Judea at that time. So I imagine it was a painful process, going through that sickness and dying. His sisters suffered caring for him. They're there day after day caring for him, hoping that Jesus is coming, hoping that he gets better, watching him get worse, going through that emotional process. And then he dies. And that feeling of loss and pain. And then the grieving process through the burial. All that pain was real. It happened. At some level, they went through a loss of hope when Jesus did not come. Have you ever been there when you're praying for a situation and you're so desperately praying that a certain outcome will come, and then it doesn't? There's a loss of hope that happens. It's not a questioning of all your faith and beliefs and not believing in God, but at some level, you are changed through that process. And they suffer through the grieving burial. But it's important to see here in this passage that they did not suffer alone. When we suffer, God suffers with us. We look at verses 33 to 38. We see that Jesus specifically loved them. Looking back at the beginning of the passage, John spends a lot of time talking about who these people are. He mentions them by name several times. He goes into backstories. He refers to Lazarus as the one that Jesus loves. Mary and Martha are heavily featured in the beginning. These are not some random people. These are people that Jesus cared for greatly, has a special relationship with them as humans, special relationship with them. Jesus wept. One of the important things to look at in the verses here is you have this idea of weeping or wailing used several times here. But they're different verbs. And in animistic cultures in Africa and Burkina Faso, other parts of the world, here in Jerusalem, the grieving process involves lots of very, very loud wailing. You honor the person's memory by wailing, usually in a loud, kind of hopeless manner. And this still happens today. This happens in Burkina today at a funeral. It's amazing to see the noise and the grief that's being demonstrated physically at a funeral. And at most of the Christian funerals now, they're trying to move away from that. But in the traditional animistic funerals, there's still this practice because there is no hope in those situations. And if you really honor your family member, you even pay people. You pay people, mourners, to come and add so that you have a bigger group of people wailing. So you can imagine, they talk in the passage about people coming from Jerusalem. So this would have been a huge crowd of people that were sitting there and wailing. This loud noise. And amongst this loud, hopeless wailing, you have Jesus sobbing. And the verb brings this idea of this emotional response that just comes out of you. I don't know how many of you watch Hallmark movies. I'm guilty. I do like a good Hallmark movie every once in a while. And there are just certain scenes, certain moments that I get teary-eyed. I admit it. I can't help myself. This emotion is evoked from me, and it causes me to cry a little bit. And we have this image here of Jesus seeing the situation, seeing the pain of Mary and Martha, seeing the wailing of this. As a human being, this emotion comes up through him, and he has to weep. But it's not a crying of hopelessness. It's this companionship of being in a place where there's so much emotion and participating in that emotional response, the sadness that's there, but not without hope. And we see one other response by Jesus, which in this translation is a little bit muted. It says deeply moved. So Jesus, again being deeply moved within, came to the tomb. In other translations, it talks about groanings or snorting. And the verb, or the word that's used there is actually this idea that's often used with horses. It's kind of a snort of a horse, this just angry, frustrated response when you see, Jesus was seeing this injustice. He knew that in a few weeks he would be destroying the power of death, and yet he was here watching how death was causing all of this pain in his Father's perfect creation. And that anger, that frustration at the power that death had, at what was going on, just evoked this snort, this reaction, physical reaction in here that is documented. He's emotionally invested and tied into this. He hates to see the way that sin is ruining his Father's creation. And he reacts. So when we suffer, God suffers with us. So the question for our family, the question for people in Burkina right now is, how do we remain faithful in the midst of the suffering? We don't want to suffer. If there was a way to kind of snap my fingers and we'd be back in Madaga and in the middle of the farm field doing stuff, and our kids could be back with their Burkinabe friends and in our home, and all those things that we've been building for the years, be back in that in a second. I would love to do that. Somehow it's not God's plan right now. And as a country, or as a mission, we're going through this process of trying to figure out, what do we do next? How do we respond in the midst of these security problems that we're seeing? How do we respond when our Christian brothers and sisters, Fulani's, come and say, we don't want to work with you right now for a couple of years at least, until we think it's safe again? How do we respond to the fear and risk that's coming through the country? How do we help the Gorma Church, the 1,200 churches that SAM has helped start in Burkina? How do we support and encourage them, as now they've only ever lived in a time of peace? And now they're going to be in an area where either there aren't a lot of attacks on churches yet, but they're going to be surrounded in an area surrounded by people who are doing attacks, by the government's violent responses to the Fulanis, by interethnic violence between other tribal groups to the Fulanis. What is the church's response in those situations? We can look back through the Bible and see dozens of examples where this has happened. The life of Abraham. He had God's promise. He knew the end. But boy, he suffered a lot. Sometimes from his own making, his own choices. But he suffered a lot through the process to get there, to see the glory of God through his descendants. We have the example of David, who was anointed to be king and then suffered under Saul, waiting for that time for that to happen. We all know the story of Job. Jesus suffered. Paul suffered. This prosperity gospel idea that if we are good Christians, everything in our life is going to be wonderful and healthy and financially great, it doesn't make sense by the examples of the pillars of our faith. It doesn't make sense based on what Jesus said and the examples that he showed. Often in our lives, if we want to see God's glory, we might have to be willing to suffer and go through a period of time where we don't know the end. We can have hope that God will be glorified in miraculous ways in the end. But during that time of that journey, we don't know how it's going to end. And I don't want to give the impression that the only way to see God's glory is to suffer. God is glorified through our faithfulness. God is glorified through the ways we love and care for our family, for each other. God is glorified in the way that we step in and help others. God is glorified through so many different ways. But often, the examples that we have in the Bible show God being glorified through the suffering of his people, their faithfulness through that suffering, and then his provision, the scene of his plan after the fact. In Burkina, we're facing lots of different challenges. And at some point in time, right now, the terrorist groups are primarily focused on military forces, security forces, police, gendarme, other groups like that. But they've begun closing down schools. And at some point, we believe that they'll turn their attention towards churches and other Christian ministries. How is the Burkinabe church going to be prepared for that? And what is the role of SIM as a mission to help them through this process? Right now, we know that there are parts of the country we can't go to. It's just completely not safe. We think it's still safe enough in the capital city, and all the missionaries are in the capital now, trying to find ways of ministering and working there. At some point in time, that might not be the case. We can leave, but our brothers and sisters in Christ, they can't. They have to stay. They have to be ready to go through this process. Right now in the country, we have about 5,000 refugees per day fleeing from the northern parts, from the eastern parts of the country. A lot of them are Fulanis, trying to get out away from the terrorists, but that brings them into contact with other ethnic groups who think that all Fulanis are terrorists. And so that's creating problems. How can the church be salt and light in that situation? How can they speak God's love into times where people are fearful and hateful? What does that mean in the United States? It's easy to see kind of the parallels to life in Burkina. And in North America, in Europe, other parts of the world, we do a lot to try to avoid suffering. I mean, no one wants to suffer. We set up our lives in a way that we have redundancies and protections, and we don't tend to live on the edge of life in a way that events can bring us to these points. Health is something that often we don't have any control over, and that can bring us to the point of going through something like this. But I want to challenge you and encourage you that don't just try to avoid suffering. Don't seek it out. But if God brings trials into your life, ask yourself, how can God be glorified through this? How can I be faithful during these times in a way that's going to bring glory to God? Because in the end, for me, that is why I'm here on this earth right now, is to glorify God. And I'd rather it be through good work and faithful service to Him and things that I love doing in nice climate-controlled countries. But sometimes it's going to be in other situations. And I ask for your help, your prayers, that our family can remain faithful. As the interim director, the decision on when to evacuate people out of the country to either our own family or others is now I'm part of that process. And I definitely ask for prayers on knowing when that might be. We don't think it's anytime soon. We don't think we're that close to that process. But things can change quickly. A year ago, we didn't imagine that any of this would be happening. And now we're here. As you read through the Bible, I encourage you to change your point of view in the stories from time to time and ask yourself what it would have been like to go through as different characters. And it can open up whole new parts of Scripture to you as you see the way that God works and interacts with people in amazing ways for His glory. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for your faithfulness to all of us here. We thank you that you created us, that you have established works and ministries and opportunities for us to serve you. You created these before we were born so that we could walk in them. You give us these opportunities to be part of what you're doing, not because you need us, Lord, but because you want to bless us to be part of your work. We pray that, Lord, that we can be faithful in the hard times and in the good times to whatever it is that you call us to do. And when challenges come our way, Lord, I pray that we would hold on to the hope that through these difficult times, you can be glorified, Lord. I pray that we can support and love one another. And thank you so much for the blessing that this community has been to us. In Jesus' name, amen.
I invite you to stand with us for the closing song.
My way. mystery to walking through the suffering piece, and we've sensed that. And I know that each of us has our own story, and some of you are in that space right now.